today? I hope you're doing well. I just wanted to come to you very quickly today to talk another story from Dark World Lightwork, or basically a story from my life that relates to the book that I have written, the memoir, Dark World Lightwork. And this one is going to be about how I have come here to be a generational curse breaker and an ancestral curse breaker for my bloodline. And I want to give some examples of that today. The first one is that this is a very kind of earthly one, but I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. Before I came along, no one went more than a couple of semesters. And then after I came along, the generation after me, out of the 5 children that came after me, 4 of them graduated from college. 2 of them graduated from esteemed universities. One of them went to Berkeley, and the other one was a soccer star at Clemson who recently just graduated. So not only did they go on to go to college, but in my eyes, they went even higher. And that's exactly what you would want as an elder or as an influence as another generation. And another thing I did was, when I was very young, I influenced my grandmother. I mentioned this before. I spent most of my young years, from I'd say about 2 to 8, mostly in federal court and federal prison, because my grandmother, who was taking care of me, was supporting her husband, my grandfather, who was going through a trial. And so most of my early memories are of that energy and that situation. And as he would ultimately lose this trial, and he ended up going to federal prison for 17 years. And for a few years after he was sent away, he still would call the house and micromanage in a very tyrannical way my grandmother's life. And she was still afraid of him, and she still bowed to his orders. And one day, I was maybe like 7 or 8 years old, and I had watched this for years, and I was very irritated, but I was at a point then when I had more of a voice, and I was able to answer the phone sometimes. And so I answered the phone one day, and it was him. And he would never say hi to me. He would always just say, "Put Joyce on the phone." And one day I held the phone down, kind of like away from my face, so I knew he could hear it. And I said, "This guy is on the phone again. And I just want you to know that he is gone, and he's not coming back for decades. And you do not have to listen to him anymore. You do not have to be afraid of him anymore. And you don't have to bow to his orders, because he has no way of enforcing them. He's only doing this because you've been afraid of him before." Something to that effect when I was a little girl. And she was stunned, and so was he. And she told me later that he couldn't do anything other than respect what I said, because I was so small and I was telling the absolute truth. And after that, he really didn't call that much. My grandmother still tried to maintain a relationship with him. However, with a person like him, you can't give them even an inch, because even accepting his phone call opened her up to his tyranny, because he did not know how to communicate in any other way. So at some point, both of them realized that they had their own separate journeys, and they sort of went on them. And that is what happens sometimes when people go to, especially people who end up in a prison situation for a very long time. At some point, they detach from the world, because you're on a different complete timeline. And if they are really, in it to grow, they'll do something very, very meaningful with that time, both people, or the people who are in that situation. But I, from a very young age, have been doing things like that. And after that, it changed the entire dynamic of our lives, because my grandmother was able to think for herself and to make decisions for our home and our future based on the 2 of us, or her and her children and her grandchild at the time. And that is what she needed to do. And she needed to break away from this energy, because she'd already done enough by choosing an unsuitable partner to have 2 children with. And she was dealing with a lot with those children because of that. And she didn't need this man, who had already influenced them negatively, to continue to do that while he was in in no position to enforce this tyranny anyway. And unfortunately, the children that he did have a huge influence on did grow up to be rather kind of like ne'er-do-wells. And luckily, I was able to grow up with a lot more grace. And so I was able to be more of my grandmother's energy returned to her finally at long last. And even me, I mean, I'm a really sharp-tongued, short-tempered person. But I'm the most delicate one out of everybody because I'm the one with the most heart in the game. I'm the one who is actually doing things out of love. And I just happen to have this personality because of the way that I grew up. You know, there's aspects of my personality. I think some people call it a shadow aspects. And so my shadow aspects are like short-tempered, irritated, basically by my situation. And my defense mechanism is to snap back with my words because I'm also an artist. But other than that, I'm a loving person who is motivated by love. And the rest of these people were motivated by money. And that was what made all the difference. And that was what opened them up to evil. And it's also what protected myself and my grandmother, as long as we could be protected, to as much as of a degree that we could be protected, was that we were not of that kind. We were on a higher frequency. So it missed us for the most part. Until the end, when we both had to come to terms with the fact that we weren't the only people in each other's lives. I did have parents and she did have children. And we had to have our moment, even energetically, with them, kind of at their mercy to see what intentions they really had for us. And now we know they really didn't love us as much as they love money. And that is just basically the tale of a starseed. I love to use these terms because they are terms that people would understand, but the tale of a person who's come down here to basically clean up a little bit, and starting at home. You know, charity begins in la casa. And you got to start with your own, and then things trickle out and up and around and down. Yay! All right, that's it. Love you. Bye. Whoa, is it still going?